Happy politics and welcome to the post-virtual budget lockdown edition of BC Poly Hot Stove. And if you were part of that virtual lockdown, I hope that this podcast will be slightly less glitchy than today's budget. I'm joined. My name is Maclean K. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Orca, and I'm joined in a socially distant manner by
Jordan Bateman, Vice President of Communications, Independent Contractors and Business Association, ICBA. Maclean, you've jinxed us now. We will be glitchy. You can guarantee it.
Oh yeah, no, it's gonna happen, but I can also almost guarantee that it will still go more smoothly than the technical side of today's BC budget. If you don't know what we're talking about, count yourself lucky. If like the 99.9% of the population who just watched the news and saw that we had a budget today, you have no idea what we're talking about. But for those of us who are either media or stakeholders, which is both of us in this podcast respectively, normally on budget day we're put in a large ballroom where we're made to surrender our cell phones. We have no internet access, and we're given a big old thick stack of paper, which is the budget, and then we get to talk to each other about it for hours. That obviously could not happen today through no fault of the Ministry of Finance, so they tried to do it virtually. Parts of it worked fine. We were able to see and hear the finance minister when we needed to, but where it really broke down was setting up the individual scrum rooms, and I'm using the air quotes for those of you on Spotify, with stakeholders. I personally batted 1 out of 6 in getting to even see or hear from a stakeholder. I know others from chatting with other reporters online. They were at 0, and a lot of them just gave up and started reaching out to people externally, just through the phone, which we're technically not supposed to do. But what are you going to do? So a difficult day for those of us who had to cover the budget. A frustrating day, and yes, much more frustrating for the staff who heroically tried to make it work, but often to no avail. But then also there was an actual budget to talk about.
Well, I want to circle back to the process, but let's talk about the actual budget, and then I will give some thoughts on the process side too.
Yes. Well, I mean, the takeaway, there are a few takeaways, and I'm going to start with the first one, which was that compared with yesterday's federal budget, this one, there are a lot of words I want to use that are going to seem loaded. I could call it dull. I could call it, a little sleepy. I don't even mean those as bad things. It's just compared with yesterday's rather feverish federal election budget, which was clearly designed to possibly trigger a federal election. This one was a little more, what are the words, Jordan? Restrained? Dull?
Yeah, dull. It was like a throne speech. Just kind of there. No, some interesting things happened with this budget. So earlier in the year, there were the worst case scenarios. We're headed for a $13.5 billion deficit, which, for a province that has been pretty good about balancing budgets under two very different governmental regimes, that was a shocking number to hear. Turns out they came in about $5 billion less than that. They actually we're under $9 billion deficit, which still, before we get too excited about clapping hands, $9 billion of deficit that we have transferred on to our children and grandchildren to pay for. So let's not get too excited. But what it showed was a few things. Number one, they collected a lot more in taxes than they expected to collect. And a lot of that was thanks to a tax that the NDP pretend to hate. Oh, and every government pretends to hate because of politics, but then love to cash the checks of the property transfer tax. They got a bunch more money in natural gas royalties, something else the NDP likes to pretend to hate, but they get a lot of money out of. Federal transfers, thanks to Trudeaunomics, spending like a drunken sailor. Some of that trickled into the province, using the forecast allowance. And then, to their credit, modestly, and very modestly, reining in some spending less than 1%. They clawed back. One wonders if that was actually the special, the small business grant program that they couldn't seem to ever hand out money for, but whatever. All that to say, their deficit this year, or last year, 2020, came in at about $8.7 billion. Unbelievably, though, they're projecting a $9.3 billion deficit for this year, a year where really, we're not seeing the same kind of widespread lockdown that we saw the year before, and have a better handle, and should be, out of the pandemic sometime this year, you'd think.
We could break down each and every one of those points you made, but I think that the biggest takeaway would be the housing angle.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, if you did listen into Finance Minister Selena Robinson's Q&A today, those were the parts, those questions rather, where it got a little I don't want to say testy, but a little more terse. Basically, the accusation being exactly what you just said. You criticized the previous government for profiting off of housing sales, and the numbers are indisputably higher than they ever were. There's just no getting around that. What's changed? And the answer was, well, not a lot. They've done things, the speculation tax, all these kinds of things you've heard before, but the price of housing continues to leap, and the real estate sales are through the roof in Vancouver and Victoria. Those of us in the market currently know exactly what that's like. And man, it's a hot market. And so it's an area the NDP are very sensitive on. I guess the one defense they have is that before they would say, well, you're profiting, you're balancing the budget on the backs of this. They're obviously not balancing the budget, but as you say, it's much better than it could have been. I mean, yes, you're right. It's kind of funny that we're all saying, oh, thank goodness it's only $9 billion in deficit when, last year there was a surplus. Granted, we all know the reasons why, but still, oh my God.
Yeah. On the housing affordability, home sales up 36% last year. 36%, which means more transactions than ever before, which means more property transfer tax flowing into coffers, $420 million more than they expected, which was already a high amount that they were expecting. They actually got far more than that. The funny thing about, you're right, I think it's fair to say it did get a little testy. Binder Sajan from CTV News asked, I think, the first affordability question. Minister Robinson did not like it. Sort of one of the classic, I reject the premise of your question responses.
Yes.
Shannon Waters followed up with an excellent question on the much long-awaited rental rebate, which again gets punted for another year. Okay, I don't understand it. But yeah, the minister was very sensitive to criticisms that they're not making life more affordable. They're rolling a couple $2 billion, which is a lot of money, into what they're calling development financing in BC Housing, essentially a plan to build 9,000 homes for middle-income families. The devil, of course, will be in the details on that. What's a middle-income family? Number one. Number two, that's about $250,000 a unit. That's a lot of money for development financing. Who are they sparking into action with that money? So there's some things that you got to take a look at there. But listen, if affordability, and specifically housing affordability, was your measure of how this budget was going to impact your life and should be judged, it's an F. I mean, there's no way around it, right? They could cut prices by 25%, housing prices, and they're still ahead of when the NDP took power, and certainly ahead of ahead of a couple years ago. So, if that is how you're grading them, that is a fail. And so no wonder, the minister was sensitive to that criticism and kind of pushed back on it. They had one of their highlight documents, which is one of the things that they'll end up farming out to MLAs and stuff to circulate widely. And it was how we're making life more affordable. And they were really stretching. I mean, bear in mind, the budget is out today, brand new budget. Tell us about your new programs. Well, we're making life more affordable by scrapping the portmanteau. Guys, that was 4.5 years ago. What have you done for me lately? Right? Thanks, but, and so a while back now. There was what was the other thing they had on there that was from MSP, the MSP tax shift, they call it a tax cut. Again, 3 and 4 years ago.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, on the portmanteau, it has now been canceled for longer than it was charged. It
must be close. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'd have to look it up.
It's in that ballpark.
It's probably true.
I mean, yes, great, but it's not like people have been living with this for generations.
No, totally. And so their big announcement for affordability, this, just to give you a context of how small, Peanuts affordability was on their radar. Free transit for kids under 12 was named like a huge step forward for affordability. Okay, now, yes, there are people downtown Vancouver and in other places who may take the bus or transit every day. And great, if you're under 12, congratulations, now you can take it for free. But for the vast majority of parents in British Columbia, a transit trip with your kid is a very infrequent experience. Maybe you take them on SkyTrain down to Science World if you live like me and live in Langley, maybe. But it's not a huge affordability issue. It will be for a small group. I think of that family, there's 5 kids in a condo.com or something. That family, this will be a big deal. Although I think once upon a time they got in trouble for letting kids on the transit. But
they did.
It'll help families like that, but that is not the vast majority of families across the province. If you're in Fort St. John, you're like, what?
Yeah, it's not to diminish it, because you're right. It will help some people, and some, I think, some more than others. But it's not what you would call a tentpole program. No. It's not the kind of thing that you would put first in your, here, if they were going to an election this year. It's not the first thing you'd put under the, here's what we're doing to make life more affordable for you. It would be one of the and alsos. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It just doesn't mean it's not the kind of thing you hang your hat on. Yeah,
exactly. But 2 things on that. Number one, it makes me wonder, given the kind of mediocre election platform, the boring throne speech, and now this, are the NDP already out of ideas? Like, is that really, and not to tempt them into having crazy ideas, because God knows I don't need more government intrusion in my life, but are you already out of ideas? Like, there was no there. So, yeah, there was another line in the budget, no balanced budgets for 7 to 9 years, followed by, although it's too early to forecast a specific timeline, that tells me we're talking about a decade. Should the NDP still be ruling, you're talking about at least a decade before they're back to balance.
Well, even if they're not, we're talking about $9 billion that has to be made up somehow. I mean, it's a steep climb. Mm-hmm. Even if that was the number one priority of the government starting tomorrow, my God, it's tough right now. And I mean, we should also say, to be fair, that until the pandemic is well and truly past us, it probably is not worth projecting. But you're right. I mean, it just shows how deep a financial pit we have all fallen into, again, because of the pandemic. But still, I mean, $9 billion, and we're all saying, oh, thank goodness. It kind of reminds me of, once you get used to COVID numbers being in the 1,000, 1,200 every day, once in a while you'll get like a day with 900, and you go, oh, thank goodness.
Yeah, good. We're on the right track. Maclean, can I talk about the big winners in this budget?
Please do.
The big 3. We'll call them the 3 wise men: John Horgan, Adrian Dix, David Eby. All 3 of their ministries and offices saw major financial increases. Obviously healthcare, I think the number that I saw was $900 million for direct pandemic healthcare, vaccinations, PPE, contact tracing. I think all of us in BC would be like, $900 million, sure. Yep. $950, sure. Yep. $2 billion, whatever it takes, just fix this problem. Yep. Like, there's no problems there. The AG office got a huge bump, though, as someone noticed. I won't pretend it was me, because I wasn't scrutinizing AG. I was looking at it from a construction point of view today. And then the Premier's office also got a big boost, presumably to try to keep it ahead of the Mental Health and Addiction Ministry, which it always needs to be a little bit ahead of, because they just love giving that talking point to the rest of the world that they fund the Premier's spin doctors more than they fund mental health.
That came up in the Q&A, and actually it was one of the few questions I was able to ask government staff in today's chat rooms was about the Premier's office bump, which went up by, I don't have it in front of me because I'm working entirely off my phone right now, but I believe by $4 million, which is a lot for a comparatively small office. We're talking about...
It's a $10 million office. It's a $10 million office.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And the answer to both the Q&A and given to me beforehand was that, well, it's so that the Premier can directly communicate with British Columbians. I'm sorry. That's not what this is going to sound like a criticism of John Horgan in particular. It is not. I have worked in a Premier's office, as some of you may know. That is not what a Premier's office does. There is no ears in the Premier's office, if you like. Yep. That is done elsewhere. Again, not a criticism, but that is just not what's happening. And even if it is, you don't need $4 million to hire somebody to surf social media or answer the emails that come in like a flood. There is a correspondence department, that kind of thing. It is such an odd and transparently evasive answer that you can't help but sort of start to think, what is going on there? It's either a significant expansion in resources in terms of people, or pay hikes, or both. It really can only be one of those things, unless they decided to build another Premier's office, a physical office, somewhere in downtown Victoria or Vancouver. Other than that, it's hard to see what's going on there.
Isn't it always Prince George that gets promised its own Premier's office and never gets delivered?
Right? Well, maybe
it's the capital of the
North. If that
North.
was happening, that would be the first thing they'd tell you. Well, Maclean and Justin McElroy, whoever asked this question, we're glad you asked. It's really important that reaching out to northern British Columbia is building a long-promised office in Prince George, something which never happened in 16 years. I mean, you can write this. You can write this in your sleep.
That doesn't really pass the smell test. We'll have to keep an eye on that. Perhaps the Premier is launching an expensive TikTok account in order to be more woke and lit with the youngsters. Don't blow it for them on TikTok, Premier. Just try to blend in as best you can. I don't know. I've got no. I can't tell you what that is about. One other number that was big, they made a big deal about the largest investment in mental health in history. I don't know if that's true or not. However, they claim it's $500 million, but only, I'm not sure what the dollar amount is, but only 195 new mental health and addiction beds across BC. 195 across all of BC. We saw 1,300 people die of opioid overdose last year alone. And those are the people who died, let alone the people who are addicted. I wonder and I question whether 195 is enough. And if it's, if some of that $500 million or more of that $500 million should have been turned in funding more beds. I think Rob Shaw's written about this. It's hard to tell because there's no context for any of this. But it seems to me that, anytime you hear about anyone who needs a bed for mental health or for addictions, they have very difficult times finding it and getting it. I'm not sure 195 across a province of 5 million people is going to be enough.
Yeah, I mean, this came up also during Minister Robinson's Q&A, and she kind of came the closest to any government source I can think of to something that I've talked about with a number of people, both other reporters and other stakeholders offline and online, actually, is that the Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions is kind of best understood as a Ministry of State. And if you're not a wonk, bear with me. Basically what that means is it's not really a full ministry in that they don't have a lot of, areas of unique responsibility and levers of funding that are unique to them. Most of what they do is part of and paid by the Ministry of Health. And so there's nothing wrong with the Ministry of State. It is what it is. But the NDP have created this thing where, it can be embarrassing for them when the Ministry of Mental Health receives less money than the Premier's office, which is the case. Yeah. And it looks bad, and it becomes tricky to explain. And so Minister Robinson, they can't say, well, really, it's a Ministry of State, because that means it's not important. But she did kind of say, well, there are, they work in tandem with the Ministry of Health and da-da-da-da, which is true, but it becomes difficult to track which resources are going specifically into crises like this. Yeah, no, exactly.
Although, I'm sure if you put John Horgan on Truth Serum, he'd feel most comfortable having Adrian Dix managing those resources more than any other minister. I think that's just sheer detail. So I can kind of see it both ways there. But yeah, I just come back to the number, 195 beds. It's just, I'm not sure that's enough. Like, that doesn't feel right. So we'll see how that rolls out. Can I talk about infrastructure?
You can. Better than anyone I know.
Okay. Some very, how you have the Oscar nominations and there's always the notable snubs? I have some very notable snubs for infrastructure dollars this year.
Oh, I can guess.
Notable snub number one, the Massey tunnel replacement. So as you recall, Christy Clark in the dying days of the BC Liberal administration had approved a new bridge. It was coming in well under budget. It was going to be open next year, 2022. NDP arrived, killed it outright, and have been promising that this is a priority as recently as the throne speech a week ago. It's a priority. With priorities like this, we don't need non-priorities. This thing is going nowhere. It's almost like it's stuck in its own traffic. It's going so slow through this congestion. Nothing in the budget for construction. I actually did get in to talk to the Ministry of Transportation folks, who did say, I'm not sure am I allowed to say what they said? I think I can. They said that, am I? I'm not sure. They're allowed, there's some money for prep work, which, is sort of agnostic as to whether it's going to be a bridge or a tunnel or refurbished, whatever. It needs to be done. Basically, Steveston Highway kind of leading into the current tunnel. But no money for construction. And, the business plan is in, they're reviewing it, there's got to go to Treasury Board, and there's a long process. But if you're thinking to yourself, we'll be driving on this in 3 years, 4 years, forget it. Like we said, the day they canceled it, they've doomed that group to at least a decade of more congestion. So no Massey Tunnel, no Taylor Bridge in Taylor, BC, connecting the North Piece and the South Piece. I found this really galling because here's a government that's raked in about $150 million more in natural gas royalties than expected to, and did not transfer a nickel of that money back to the region where that gas is coming from. I don't like it. I think it's foolish. I think it shows how Vancouver Island and Lower Mainland centric this government is. If that 60-year-old Taylor Bridge falls apart, has an issue, you're talking about 2.5 hours of extra driving to get around it. It is a vital connection, not just for the people of the Peace, north and south, but also for the commerce that goes through. It connects on the road all the way up to the Alaska Highway. Like, this is a major piece of infrastructure that needs to be done. And here you actually had $150 million kind of fall into your lap from that region, and you couldn't put any money towards it. It boggles my mind that you wouldn't include something for the Taylor Bridge. Nothing for Surrey-Langley SkyTrain, although I'm told that that's still kind of TransLink's issue. They haven't really come and asked for the official amount yet, but nothing allocated at all. Nothing for the Quesnel bypass that Bob Simpson, the mayor there, wants so badly. Nothing for North Shore Rapid Transit. Again, TransLink sort of spinning its wheels. What's it going to recommend on North Shore Rapid Transit? Nothing there. And nothing for one that bugs me the most every day, the Brunette Highway 1 interchange, which I do believe I once saw a piece of paper that said that it would be completed by 2022. They have not even started. They haven't even got a plan agreed to. New Westminster, shame on you for dragging your heels on this. Let's get on with fixing the Brunette interchange, because it's an accident every single morning on Highway 1.
Two things. First is, if you're watching the show and you're one of Jordan's fans looking to tattle him out, he has not broken any rules. You're allowed, what the ministry officials say is not for attribution. So if you don't name them, you don't quote them, it's fine. So you're okay.
Okay,
You've
good.
done nothing wrong. And second, not to diminish any of those projects you just listed, because they're all important. But the one that will quite understandably get the most attention is the Massey Tunnel replacement project, because this has been a political football. Again, this also came up in the minister's Q&A today. It is regularly cited with good reason as the biggest choke point for traffic in the province, because it is. And also because, as you and I have discussed on several occasions, the tunnel isn't safe.
No.
If you're in it during an earthquake, you're not going to make it. And that is a sobering thought. And yeah, it was canceled for, well, you know, if we're being honest, it was canceled for spite.
Yep.
It was canceled for spite. And as you say, hopefully would have been completed next year. They're doing their due diligence, they say, for a project that had been approved and had gone through all of its environmental certifications and all that. So it's not in the budget now. It's probably safe to say that it's not going to happen in the near future at this point. It has. Yeah, it's a shame.
You know, budgets can change year to year, but bear in mind, this is a 3-year financial plan.
Exactly.
So there's no money in the budget for 3 years. Now, they could change it 3 years from now. Mm-hmm. That's fine, but they haven't. One other project I forgot to mention, Burke Mountain School in Coquitlam. This was a big election issue in that riding. John Horgan promised it explicitly. We will build a new school on Burke Mountain to help all these thousands of Coquitlam students. It's been approved by the school district. It still has no funding attached to it. Although I did, again, went and talked to the education folks on this, and I was told that they're looking at it. Treasury Board has yet to approve it. However, the plan is in, and there is a kind of an unallocated pot of money at some point in the budget, not necessarily for Burke Mountain, but for schools in general that could be allocated towards it. So I was asked by some Coquitlam folks who I greatly admire and respect specifically about Burke Mountain, and that is my report, sir, on Burke Mountain.
It's a good report. It's a good report. If you're listening, you're probably noticing that my voice is starting to go, and that's only because of doing this since 8 a.m. this morning. Budget days are long days, especially when you can see people. When you're, we're going on 7 hours of technical difficulties. It would frustrate anyone. So yes, I apologize if it sounds like I'm sounding more and more like Kathleen Turner.
Wow, that would be fantastic. Or Dan Burt. Start talking like Dan Burt. Dan Burt's got the best voice.
I can pull that off.
I will
need a turtleneck to even attempt that.
I know. And no offense to Jordan Armstrong, whose voice is also excellent, but Dan Burt's voice is like Chef's kiss. I always say chef's kiss because my stupid kids. I mean, I love my kids, but they've ruined me for saying chef's kiss. I always say chef's kiss, and it's embarrassing for me now. So, darn kids, ruining everything.
It's not even the first time you've done that on this show.
I know, and it's terrible. It's so bad. Can I give you my thing to watch for Fiscal Hawks moment?
You may indeed.
Okay. There's a little something called INBC, I-N capital BC, which seems to be a home for $500 million of my corporate welfare and government slush fund nightmares. Essentially, the NDP have just transferred $500 million to this Crown Corporation. They claim it's going to be to support innovation businesses. That's corporate welfare, so I'm not sure quite where that's going, but there were very few details in this. She did mention it in her question. She was asked something about getting the economy going again, and she touted NBC as being a key part of that plan. Would have been nice to have some details if that's such a key part of the plan, NDP, but okay, we'll wait to see what rolls out from here. But let's all keep an eye on NBC because they have $500 million of our dollars, and Lord knows what's going to happen to that.
You mentioned the big winners. Do you see any big losers from today's budget?
Yeah, there's not much news for small businesses. Nothing for, we're in construction. There's a $4 million skills fund that was rolled out, but it's to train unemployed people for construction, childcare. It was like 4 industries that have very little crossover. So, it's going to be like, okay. And, we know the NDP, that money will very likely go to their friends in the building trades unions who, of course, already get money through their sweetheart monopoly deal on building infrastructure. Yet that will go there. So, but there was nothing there for small businesses. We're going to continue, we'll give out the rest of that small business grant. The minister could not give a definitive figure as to how much has actually been given out so far. But she assured us, Ravi Kahlon has said, he's given lots of the money away, so we should, I guess we can rest easy in that. But I would have liked to have seen a dollar amount on BC Budget Day. But other than that, I mean, not much there. And now, no tax increases, which good. I mean, I guess carbon tax increase, but other than that, no unexpected tax increases. I thought Bob Mackin, Bob Mackin, I thought had the funniest question of the day, citing 420 and then asking how government can only have made $400 million in cannabis sales, in however long it's been since they legalized sales. I found that quite amusing. It's a good point. We've always been told this is a multi-billion-dollar industry.
It's true.
We've sat through meetings where every great thing in British Columbia could be funded if we just legalized marijuana. Well, that money has not materialized. So that tells you either we were sold a bill of goods about how much British Columbians are smoking up, or we haven't stamped out the black market. I think it's probably the black market. I think it was a little bit of a hyperbole, but also the black market. But that needs to. I was going to say it needs to go up. I don't really want it to go up, but if you're looking for ways for government to make money and you're not reopening casinos yet for a while, marijuana seems like a place where you could do it, and not much is happening there. So maybe when they're done doing police checks on Boundary Road, they could they could get on cracking down on the black market of marijuana.
I mean, on Budget Day and the day after the federal budget, I guess we should talk about the restrictions that came out yesterday, including police road checks, which were, here's the thing, they were announced as a general concept, really, in yesterday's briefing, but it was just sort of, well, we'll be doing this. Yeah. And a lot of people will ask, well, what does that mean? I mean, does that mean, because they said it would be, well, you can't travel across health authorities. But as I think you pointed out, for a lot of people, that means not going to work. Now, obviously, that would be essential travel, but did that mean you'd be having to pass through a checkpoint? And now they have since clarified it, which is tricky that they couldn't have done it that day. To meaning, if you're heading to the ferry terminal, you'll go through something like what do they call the drunk driving stops, check stops. Yeah. And along, major highways to Alberta, that kind of thing. Okay, well, that makes sense. But it's the kind of thing that probably could have easily been answered when asked yesterday. Yeah.
I don't understand what John Horgan was doing yesterday with that half-baked announcement. And I'm not sure if you... go ahead.
I was going to say, he announced a couple of things that were not in any way covered in the 45-minute technical briefing that media had beforehand. So you sit through this, and they're all rather boring. It's not a criticism; it's a technical briefing, so that you'll be prepared to ask intelligent questions after the formal announcement. And then, he announced things that weren't there. You can only be baffled and surprised.
Yeah, and then he didn't have, and so you do that, you spring it on the media after, but then you don't have answers to the very rudimentary questions. Look, none of us thought he was really going to have police lining Boundary Road. So the funny thing about health authorities is they are completely nonsensical in how they're drawn. Like, you can go from Hope all the way to Burnaby. That's one health region. But cross Boundary Road, Vancouver, Coastal, all the way up past Squamish, all the way, I think, to Whistler is, I think actually to Lillooet is like another health authority. So for me, I live in Langley and I work at Metrotown. I can come to work with no fear that I'm crossing a health boundary. My boss lives 30 minutes closer, 25 minutes closer than I do, but he lives in Vancouver. So him going from Vancouver to Metrotown would actually be crossing the boundary. So I told him, we'll see you in 5 weeks, don't bother coming in, but just kidding. Now, they've clarified work is essential, but you wonder if that will last forever. Is all work essential? There's still some things that you kind of question there. But I didn't understand it because we saw such a bad rollout by Doug Ford last weekend, specifically around police checks. And was the entire NDP just off Twitter last weekend? Did they just take the weekend off and not follow what was going on in Ontario? It was an out-and-out revolt, even among people who up to that point had claimed that they wanted more harsh measures and lock us down for the sake of COVID-0. Even they came out against the Ford plan. And then all of a sudden you're talking about checkpoints and counterattack checkpoints. There are very important racial considerations that need to take into that. I don't fear being pulled over by police the way some Indigenous people, many Indigenous people fear it. And it's because I have a completely different experience than they've had. We've talked a lot about that the last few years as well. And yet, so it just was so ham-fisted. I didn't understand. It was almost like, John Horgan was like, hold my beer, Doug Ford. I'm going to, let me jump in. And I think the announcement we all wanted was, okay, I'm moving Astra Zeneca. It's open to everyone over 40.
Yeah.
That was the announcement to make. And, you could have said, we're exploring this week. We realize, May long weekend's coming up. We see this as a 6-week. We've got to, get the numbers under control. And so be prepared for later this week. There might be some, important announcements to be made, and kind of leave it at that. But right now, the most important thing you can do is go get your AstraZeneca if you're a Gen Xer. But yeah, he just kind of threw these little things out, and then was shocked that the media were swarming them, going, "What is this?" It didn't make any sense. I guess they'll continue to peel it back. I presume now that they're restricting. I hear now that they're restricting ferries to essential use. They're going to cut down on sailings. They're going to, I imagine, cancel provincial campground reservations for people out of area. Those all make good sense, and I think were things that most of us suggested pre-Easter. But yeah, I don't know, the road check thing. I just find I've always find that just a step too far.
Yeah, I agree. Anytime you ask the police to do things randomly, you're going to create problems like that. Two things I want to add to that is that we talk about not leaving your health authority. I think if you ask the average British Columbian what their health authority is, they would tell you it's British Columbia. Yeah. And in many ways, it's a better answer that actually reflects their day-to-day life, right? I mean, if I live in Victoria, I'm in Island Health. But if I happened to be in Vancouver and fell and broke my ankle, I have every confidence that I can go to the hospital there, even though it's not my health authority, because it's true. And so, expecting people to understand the differences and the borders, the boundaries between Fraser Health and Vancouver Coastal Health is just, it's an esoteric thing that doesn't affect their day-to-day lives in any way whatsoever, nor should it. And so now expecting them to embrace these boundaries, we can't leave these things, we can't leave our health authority. Why would they know what their health authority is? Most people don't know their blood type. Again, and this isn't a criticism of everyday people. They don't need to know their health authority. You really can go to the hospital in Fort Nelson if you live in Vancouver. It's fine. The other thing I would say is on the AstraZeneca thing, And this is a point that I brought up in a phone call with our good friend Jody Vance last night, is, look, this is good news. And every shot in the arm that someone gets is better for all of us. But the one thing that I would say is that all the people you see on Twitter are all kind of the same, in that we are all sort of knowledge economy types who sit in front of a computer, and it's not that hard to get on a whole pile of computer wait lists all at once, and maybe sit and call the little boutique pharmacy over and over and over again until they call. Great, and that's good for you, and there's no but here. Just don't forget the bus drivers, school teachers, plumbers, security guards, single parents, for whom, having a few minutes to sit and go through the same registration process for Shoppers and London Drugs and Rexall, it's just not something they can do in daylight hours. And sitting on multiple phone calls, it's not possible at all. And so, again, this isn't a criticism. Just don't forget about these people, because they're not on Twitter, and they in many cases they need the shots much more. They're at more risk. So just keep them in mind is all I will say.
Yeah. One of the cardinal sins in politics is thinking that everyone lives like you do, or everyone should live like you do. And that is obviously patently false, because no one lives like me. But you know what I mean? That just is not the way the world goes. So you're exactly right. That's why I was a little frustrated with the idea that we had they encouraged us to sign up to register for our vaccine. So my sense in registering for that, and maybe I didn't read it closely enough, was that I'm registering for it in the moment that a 45-year-old named Jordan Bateman is eligible for any kind of vaccine. I would get an email from the government, go here and get book your appointment. I still haven't gotten one 25 hours after it was announced. Now, I'm a knowledge economy person, like you said. I have an appointment Thursday afternoon at Walmart in Metrotown. Come and see me there. You'll see a grown man weep for joy in the aisles of Walmart. And never been so excited to go to Walmart. Please, let the deliveries continue. But that is not the case for many people. And I felt bad for people who were like, I would talk to, and they'd be like, oh yeah, so I'm going to start calling tomorrow. Great, have your appointment in 3 weeks. You had to act fast in order to get one of these appointments, because there's just so few of these doses around. And for someone like me who's like, okay, I take Astra Zeneca, I'm not worried about it. I'm on blood thinners, so I'm even less risk for a clot than a normal human. Okay, I'm happy to do it, because that's one more Pfizer dose available for my kid, or for my grandma, or for my parents, and happy to do it. But yeah, we got to make sure that you can't tell people register for your vaccine and then not actually send them a note saying, hey, the vaccines are available now, go and get them. I find that really weird, especially since, again, every person we can take off that quote unquote, I guess now it's a Pfizer Moderna list the government's compiled, is one more dose for somebody else. I've talked to most disappointed, by the way, about the whole vaccine thing, is actually my 17-year-old daughter. She has been a frontline worker for Save On Foods for more than a year. She's actually working at the Langley vaccination clinic. And sure enough, there was an end of night, and they were like, okay, we have some doses for staff. If you're a staff, come and we'll give you your shot. Maclean, they wouldn't give it to her because she doesn't turn 18 for another 23 days.
Oh my God.
And she's like, what is going to change about my body in 23 days? But they couldn't give it to her because she turns 18 in 23 days. So she's a little miffed that her mother and I now are getting AstraZeneca, 2 weeks before her birthday, 3 weeks before her birthday. Yeah, and for me, I'm like,
oh my God.
And I think of other frontline people. There are many 18-plus-year-olds who've been working at Save On Foods or other grocery stores day after day, week after week, week after week, putting up with a lot of nonsense and putting their own health at risk. And they're not doubling up working at a vaccination clinic, and they still haven't been vaccinated either and haven't had the offer. And I do wonder about that, right? But if me taking AstraZeneca means one more Moderna dose for one of them, I'm all for it.
It's frustrating because I think you're right in that people did not understand that the government registration is in many ways completely separate from what just happened with AstraZeneca. Yeah. So we all registered, hopefully, to get one of the Pfizer and Moderna doses from, I want to say the government, but essentially through your doctor or a COVID or vaccination clinic. And that is best understood as completely separate and partitioned from the AstraZeneca rollout, which appears to be done through private pharmacies. Again, this is not a bad thing, but I don't think people understood it.
No. And send an email. Just send an email. You have a list. Send an email to everyone there between 40 and 55 saying, hey, you're still on the list for Pfizer and Moderna. However, if you're willing to get AstraZeneca, go to the bcpharmacy.org website. You can cut the line and get there now. It's an email list. That's the whole point of comms. And so, some reporters were like, man, I'm getting a lot of questions about this. This is really confusing. Yeah, the way to answer it is send everyone on that list an email telling them what to do. You have the list, just send it. I don't understand that.
I don't either. And to the point of your daughter, that's so frustrating. That something not similar, because I'm not a frontline worker, happened to me today where I got the email from Save on Food saying, hey, you can book your, no, wait till the end. You can book your appointment. And I had that rush, oh my God. And so I clicked the link, and this is during the lockup today, so technically I wasn't supposed to do this, but I did this on my phone. And it says, okay, you can book your appointment, and I'm getting excited. And it shows 5 days of slots. Mm-hmm. And one is tomorrow morning. I'm like, I don't care. I'm going to book it. And you click it and you start to enter your info. And then it disappears saying someone else has taken it. Yep. Okay. Try again. And I did this through the whole 5 days. I still don't have an appointment.
Oh.
So what I'm wondering now is, do I have to re-register? I don't think I do, because I haven't booked anything. But I got the email saying, Kay, your window, you can book something. And I watched them disappear in front of me as other faster, better typers snatched them up. And good for them. I'm not jealous, but I am frustrated.
Yeah. Well, and then here's the other thing, right? One of the problems with having every pharmacy do their own bookings, one of the main problems, is that there's no controls. So, for example, between my wife and I, we have 3 appointments booked. So it's I'll cancel the 3rd as soon as I've got my shot and she's got my shot, or she's got her shot and I'm guaranteed, right? But, you feel kind of bad. But at the same time, I don't know what to do. Walmart may not, maybe a delivery is missed at Walmart and I need that Friday one.
No, those wait lists are not real. I think there are a lot of people that are on it, are on all the lists and on several of them more than once. Mm-hmm. I am reminded of a friend who worked for the Calgary Flames a long time ago when they looked at their season ticket waiting list, and they found that there were people who were on there as many as 10 times. Either just using their same name over and over and over again, or their kid who was 9, or using a middle name. And so they did an audit because they wanted to know, how deep is this wait list? They thought it was enough to fill the Saddle Dome 3 times over. No, it ended up being a fraction of a fraction, because people are on the list several times over. And why not? There was no rule against it. It made sense to take every chance to be offered a season ticket, because you never know which tickets might pop up when they call you. So there was no incentive to not do it. Something like that is happening now with pharmacies. I'm on the Save On wait list. I'm on the Rexall wait list. I'm on the Shoppers wait list. I couldn't even get on the London Drugs wait list. They were too full. And I have called to some independent pharmacies who have said the same thing. So it's, God willing, one of them will email me tonight and I'll book something, and then I'll cancel the other wait lists. But it's frustrating, Jordan.
It is
frustrating.
It is frustrating. Hang in there.
Many other options.
There's light at the end of the tunnel. There's light at the end of the tunnel. I was thinking of my wife, who's not a reactive political personality like I am. Made a joke the other night about John Horgan and the light at the end of the tunnel, or things are looking great. And she's like, oh, it's like Bush's mission accomplished manner. And I was like, it is. Mission accomplished. Mission accomplished. Can I give you just one more thing on budget? Some
Please.
Frightening economic indicators to think about. So GDP last year fell 5.3%. That means the BC economy contracted by more than 1/20th. That's a significant contraction. Now, it's projected to grow 4.4% this year, but it won't be until late in 2022 that we even get back to where we were pre-COVID. So that's a bit of a concern. BC housing starts. We talked about affordability. Here is why affordability is going to be a problem for the NDP going into the next election. BC housing starts dropped 16% in 2020. Okay, so you think, oh, well, it's like GDP, Jordan, it'll rebound. Nope. According to the government's documents, they expect it to drop a further 8.5% in 2021, drop 3% more in 2022, and drop 1.3% in 2023. So what we're saying is like a 1/3 drop, 30-ish% drop in housing starts from the day the NDP, from the day before COVID to NDP taking power, or the next election. That is why affordability will be the #1 issue in the next election, no matter what the NDP do. They could give They can give 9,000 free houses away. It will still be the number one issue going into the next election. Also, non-residential building permits fell 15% in 2020, which you're like, oh, that's 15%. That's, okay, manageable. Here's the problem. It fell 26% for commercial permits and 22% for industrial. Government was up by more than a third. So government really picked up the slack when commercial and industrial investors stepped out. This is scary news for a lot of people as well. Non-residential is expected to be down another 8% this year. Municipal halls have got to find a way to speed up and make it cheaper to start investing and building in our communities, or there's going to be 10% of the economy construction, which is going to contract quickly, and we'll never get back to that GDP level that we need to be at. So government, you got to find ways to encourage people to actually invest in British Columbia.
Yeah, and on the housing thing, I mean, we have, because it's become such a political football, we've talked about, foreign buyers and speculators and all that, and these were problems to fix. But in some ways, we have made the problem much more complicated than it really is, and that ultimately it kind of boils down to we build fewer units of housing than we grow the population each year. Yeah. And it really, that's what it is. That is, there are other things that contribute to the problem. Yes, not denying that. Yep. But the core problem is that, and it's simple. It is basic math, and we haven't fixed it yet. And from what you're saying, it's getting worse. Yeah.
I don't know if you saw, you probably didn't. I snuck and saw some of the highlights from the Christy Clark Calling Commission testimony today. She was asked specifically.
I didn't at all. I didn't get it.
She was asked specifically by one of the lawyers about the tie between money laundering and housing affordability going down, like housing prices going through the roof. She said, no experts ever told us for years, that was not mentioned. There was no police reports on it. There was no, it's hard to quantify or legislate or work on something. And then she said, and then we did bring in, for example, when the evidence finally showed that foreign investment was driving up some costs, we brought in a foreign investment tax, and look what's happened. Prices have still gone up, even right now, when foreign investors aren't coming to British Columbia. So, interesting points by her there. She also said, they asked her if, a certain amount of money seemed like a lot to gamble. And she's like, well, I'm not a gambler. I really have no idea. Which it's kind of classic Christy, classic Christy Clark kind of answer. I don't know. I don't gamble. Is $100,000 a lot to gamble? I don't know. I never go to casinos. Interesting things. I'm looking forward to reading the inevitable Mulgrew, Cooper, brouhaha, completely different versions of the same testimony in the media tonight.
Well, I mean, I did, because of the budget, I didn't see any of it whatsoever. So I too look forward to those stories. And I kind of sympathize with what you say of the casino answer. I think $10 is too much to gamble. Yeah. I'm far too Scottish. So I have no idea. I could not intelligently answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, the Packers, I think, are 12-1 to win the Super Bowl next year. I love the Packers. I'm like, I'm not going to spend $20 on gambling. Come on.
That's just, you don't play with money. That's not a thing you play with.
It's hard to make
Your
money.
Life, maybe, but never money.
Exactly. It's hard to make money. I can spend it on gambling. So I found that kind of an interesting thing. So I'll be curious what the feedback is, what the coverage is like. Yeah. Apparently only 2.5 hours on the stand, which is far less than most. Yeah.
Than many probably hoped. Interesting. Okay, well, something to dig into tomorrow morning. Until I think we'll probably skip our weekly segment on the BC Liberal leadership race because I'm not aware of any news unless you have any. But
Gavin Dew likes the Okanagan. I noticed that. The Okanagan is Gavin Dew wrote a piece for the Daily Courier, and I can tell you the Okanagan is Gavin Dew's happy place. So that is the one thing I can remember from this week.
Excellent. We'll hear more about it next week in a more traditional version of BC Poly Hot Stove. Until then, he's Jordan Bateman. I'm Maclean Kay. I almost got that wrong. You can tell how tired I am. Happy politics.